Well, thank you everybody for inviting me to speak tonight. I'm going to talk about the connection between plastics and climate change, if I can figure out how to present, and a bit about what we do at Beyond Plastics. Oops. There we go. Okay, so my name is Alexis Goldsmith, and I am the organizing director at Beyond Plastics. We are a national project based out of Bennington College, and our project is spearheaded by Judith Enck, who is the former EPA regional administrator for Region 2, which includes New York and New Jersey, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and a few other territories. There's my email. Feel free to reach out to me, and our website. You can also follow us on social media at the following social media handles. We post quite a lot. Back in October, we released a new report called The New Coal, Plastics and Climate Change. And this report took a comprehensive look at the climate change impacts of plastic production, usage, and disposal in the United States. And it built upon a 2019 report from the Center for International Environmental Law, also called Plastics and Climate Change, the Hidden Cost of a Plastic Planet. So we know that plastics are made from chemicals and fossil fuels. Mostly they are made from ethane gas today in the United States. And ethane is a gas that comes from hydraulic fracturing. We know that fossil fuels are the cause of the climate crisis, the leading cause. About 70% of emissions are caused by fossil fuel extraction and combustion, according to the International Panel on Climate Change, or sorry, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And when we put all that energy into the atmosphere, the oceans have absorbed about 90% of that energy, causing the oceans to warm and causing more intense storms, hurricanes, and more unpredictable weather patterns. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. And we know also that the effects of climate change are not felt equally. And unfortunately, usually those who contribute the least amount of emissions to the problem suffer more than those that contribute the most, or those that contribute more emissions are not held accountable for their impacts. We know that the planet's climate is significantly changing. The atmospheric carbon is at a record high since we began monitoring that. And just last year, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change declared a code red for humanity. So we need to stop the extraction and combustion of fossil fuels as soon as possible to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Now, most people are familiar with the downstream effects of plastic pollution. We see it in our environment. It's very impossible to ignore. And by 2050, it's estimated there will be more plastics in the ocean than fish. The world is producing more than 300 million tons of virgin plastics every year, which again is being driven by extraction of fossil fuels. And 40% of that plastic is destined to be single use. So it'll be used for just a few moments and then discarded, where it will persist in the environment for centuries. The world has produced nearly 10 billion tons of plastic since 1950. That's more than 1 ton of plastic for every person on Earth. And half of that 10 billion tons was produced in just the last 15 years. The proliferation of single-use and disposable plastics has gone hand in hand with the proliferation of hydraulic fracturing in the US. Once in the environment, plastic waste causes real problems for wildlife because they mistake it for food. We've all heard these stories, but we are also ingesting plastics. We're eating, breathing, and drinking microplastics in the environment that come from plastic pollution, because once plastic is in the environment, it doesn't biodegrade because it is flawed by design. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces called microplastics, which are then carried all over the world on the air and in our water systems. But what most people don't know about plastic is that it is also a huge emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, if plastic itself were a country, it would be the 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, and plastics emit more than the entire continent of Africa. So this is what our report looks at, and I'll tell you how you can download the report later in the slideshow. But we just looked at the US's plastic manufacturing, use, and disposal, and then we compared it to coal-fired power plants as a metric for kind of expressing this impact. So a couple of things to note before I continue about the report. The data that we used for the report, and the report was compiled by Material Research. Big thanks to them, and Jim Billette, who is the main author of this report. Jim took the self-reported data that is publicly available through the EPA to put together the total emissions that I'm going to present. And he looked at the 10 stages of plastic production, use, and disposal, from fracking for the feedstocks for plastics to disposal and pollution in our environment. And the note about that self-reported data is that the EPA requires some, but not all, facilities to report their data, and they require reports on some, but not all, types of greenhouse gas emissions. So this report is really a very conservative underestimate of the impacts of plastic. And you may be surprised to find that the impacts of plastic before they reach your shelves are as great, if not greater than, once they are discarded. So we start with fracking for plastics, and I'm not going to go through all 10 stages because I don't have enough time, but I'm just going to hit the major ones. And we have this key. So each of these symbols is a coal-fired power plant. In 2020, the average coal-fired power plant in the United States emitted 2 million tons of greenhouse gases, or CO2 equivalent. So it could be methane or carbon or another greenhouse gas, but they take the equivalent. And the shaded symbol is one coal-fired power plant's worth of emissions. So that is how much fracking for plastics emitted just in 2021. There's 17 coal-fired power plants in 2021. And by 2025, expansion of fracking for plastics could add another 6 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And this is a theme in the report, that this problem is getting bigger because the fossil fuel industry is banking on plastics to be their plan B. We're decarbonizing our energy and transportation sectors, so they want to put that fossil fuels into plastics. And this expansion could threaten our ability to remain under a 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in warming, which the IPCC agrees is necessary to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Luckily in New York, hydraulic fracturing is banned, but in our neighboring states, Pennsylvania and Ohio and Delaware, they are not as lucky because fracking has a huge potential to contaminate underground aquifers and drinking water. Not going to go into too much detail on fracking, but if you're interested, you should watch Gasland. This is a documentary that came out in 2010, and it's still just as relevant today, if not more so, because fracking has proliferated even more since then. I talk about the transporting and processing of fracked gases because this is a really important piece of the infrastructure to make raw plastics. So once that gas is extracted from the well, it has to go somewhere. It has to be processed before it becomes the raw feedstocks for plastic. And I like this map because it really just highlights how deeply our infrastructure is intertwined with petrochemicals. This is a map of oil and gas pipelines in the United States, or sorry, natural gas pipelines in the United States. The United States has almost 3 million miles of oil and gas pipelines, and even more are being built today. The biggest impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions that we have from the self-reported data is the ethane gas crackers. And these are where the biggest expansion is happening because in order to capitalize on that ethane that the industry is extracting from the ground, they need more gas crackers to turn it into plastics. So you can see by the unshaded symbols that this has a real potential to impact the climate even more in the next 4 years. And as it said at the beginning, by 2030, plastic production in the United States will outpace coal in the United States in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And the pollution from these facilities is not shared equally. 90% of the pollution is released into just 18 communities. And these communities are 2/3 more likely to be people of color. Here's some photos of frontline communities that I just love because of their impact. Foamed plastic insulation, I include this one because even this one shocked even myself. Luckily, we don't need to rely on foam plastic insulation, which off-gases for 50 years. We can use recycled glass to make fiberglass insulation. And, oh, sorry, I mentioned chemical recycling and municipal waste incineration. Chemical recycling is being touted as the new solution by the industry to the plastic waste crisis. But this is really just a double speak for burning plastic, because all chemical recycling does is turn plastic into low-grade fuel for burning in cement kilns. And municipal waste incineration obviously is another huge impact. And I mentioned plastic in our water because once plastic is in the environment, it interrupts our ecosystem's ability to act as a carbon sink, especially in the ocean. So as I said, plastics are the petrochemical industry's plan B. And this continued expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure, of plastics infrastructure, threatens our ability to avoid the climate crisis. But we at Beyond Plastics think we are too big to fail, and this is what we are doing, and we welcome you to join us. First, we offer a course on plastic pollution. This is a masterclass on the issue with a focus on public action, and enrollment is open for the spring course. If you'd like to join, you can go to beyondplastics.org/events. Or you can just email me and I'll send you the registration link. It's only $100 to audit. We are building a robust grassroots movement to pass legislation that addresses this problem. We're not working on all of these bills. We do work very hard on the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act and the local single-use plastic bans, but I include these other bills because, or these other policies, because this is such an interconnected issue. It's really not just banning plastics. There's many other reforms that need to happen. We organize, we call our representatives, and I help people organize constituent meetings. So educating them on how to teach their representative about this issue and supporting them with data and confidence. I organize call-in days, we send postcards, we write letters to the editor, we get resolutions passed. We do everything we can, basically going at it like a pack of wild dogs is the strategy. And this is one of my favorite actions that we did. Sorry, Beyond Plastics didn't do this action, but I do organizing for clean air in New York's capital region. And one of those organizations that I work with is called Lights Out Norlight. Norlight is a hazardous waste incinerator located in Cohoes, New York. The picture on the left is from MLK Junior Day of 2020 when they had an open fire. The community has been suffering living next to this facility for 30 years, and we've been organizing to get their permits denied. Their Title V permits are up for renewal. They expired at the end of last year. And one of the actions that we did was a sunflower planting. This was more symbolic because we can't just like bioremediate the soil, but on our own, but sunflowers are hyperaccumulators. They accumulate toxins and heavy metals from the soil. So again, it was more symbolic as a gesture of healing and the community coming together. And that action was inspired by peace activist Kathy Kelly, who was arrested in 1980 for planting corn on a not the Kings Bay nuclear site. Sorry, I'm getting her confused with the Kings Bay Plowshare 7. But she was basically arrested for planting corn for protesting nuclear weapons. And that action was inspired by her. And we have fun with it too. We make memes. We had a meme contest this year, and we try to make it lighthearted and, you know, meet people where they're at. It's a heavy subject. So here's where you can go to download the report. There's the link, or just beyondplastics.org. You can find it on our website. And you can also find a slideshow and sample toolkits you can use to help spread the word about the report. And you can sign up for emails also on our website, beyondplastics.org. And there's our social media handles again. So sorry that I went over, but welcome to take any questions.
So Alexis, we don't have any questions right now, but that was a great presentation. I don't know if you could see everybody, but they're all there in the dark.
Oh, thank you.
They're clapping if you can't hear them.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I will be in touch via email because I definitely want that information.
Great. Yeah, I'm happy. I know I gave a lot of links, so happy to just send them out via email.
Absolutely. I can email blast them as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.